Okay, good morning. We're continuing with the Ramchal, Path of the Just, page 184, and we are in the chapter of Nikius, where we are taking a deeper dive into some of the nuanced areas of our behaviors and our practices, and checking out to make sure that we're doing things the way we are meant to be doing them. So, on the bottom of 184, the line between legitimate financial efforts and legitimate business practices. Okay, so we've been discussing a lot about sort of our personal our personal conduct in our financial. I just muted you, Gotti. We're talking about our personal conduct in our own financial world, in terms of how we do our business, if we have a business, or how we interact with other people economically. And sometimes we think to ourselves, okay, the main thing is that I'm a good person, that I'm doing things the right way. But the truth is that it's a lot more detailed than that. It's not always so simple, and there's a lot of specifics and nuances, and we're going to try to identify that fine line a little bit now. So perhaps you will say to yourself, but how is it possible for us not to make efforts in our business dealings to persuade our fellow men regarding the quality of the merchandise that we are selling and its worth? As we were talking last week about false advertising and not promoting our goods in a way that's inaccurate. So how are we supposed to succeed in business if we don't engage in a little bit of false advertising here and there? The answer is there's a great distinction between what is permitted and what is forbidden in this matter. For whatever is done to show potential buyers the true quality of the object and its beauty, that effort is indeed good and proper. However, what is done to conceal blemishes of his object is nothing more than financial deceit and is prohibited. This is a major rule regarding honesty in business dealings. Okay, this is something to just to focus on for a minute. What he's saying over here is that this does not mean at all that we can't, compete. This doesn't mean that we can't market, that we can't advertise, that we can't make efforts to sell whatever we're selling, or to sell our services. Of course we can, and we can, and we should. But what we have to be very careful in the process is to ask ourselves, am I being totally honest over here? Am I accurately and honestly portraying my services or what I'm selling, or am I being in some way deceitful? And if the answer is that I'm deceiving in some way, then I should try to rethink my approach if I want to be consistent with the concept of Nikius. Okay, it's pretty straightforward. Does anybody have a thought about that, or an example from their own experience that they would want to share?
Is that stuff yours?
Sorry? Oh.
The table. Rabbi,
Okay.
stuff in the table?
No. Oh, that's background. Okay, fine. So other more obvious pitfalls in the course of doing business. Let's continue.
Yeah.
I will not speak at length about the subject of accurate measures.
Hey, did
Guys, in L'chaim Center, shush.
Yeah, guys, you have to be quiet.
Thank you. Okay. I will not speak at length about the subject of accurate measures, for it is written about explicitly. The Torah writes about this. So this is in Deuteronomy, that there's an obligation that we have to, that we can't deceive people through inaccurate weights and measures. You shall not have in your pouch a weight and a weight, a large one and a small one, a perfect and honest weight you shall have, a perfect and honest measure you shall have. For an abomination of Hashem, your God, are all who do this, all who act corruptly. Okay, so the Torah says straight out, it's an explicit prohibition in the Torah against false weights and measures. You work in a store and you're selling a pound of herring, but your scales are a little bit off, and you're not really selling a pound. You're selling, 15 ounces. This is not acceptable. This is not an acceptable practice, and the Torah explicitly outlaws it. And believe it or not, it's called an abomination, which is particularly interesting because there are not very many prohibitions in the Torah which are in the category of abomination. Usually the word abomination is limited to some of the areas of sexual immorality and some of the prohibitions regarding kashrut. But it's interesting that this, not being totally glot kosher, so to speak, with your weights and measures is considered to be an abomination. It's pretty serious. Because after all, who are we? Who are the Jewish people, if not, the people that are setting the standard for how human interaction and how business is meant to be conducted? It's really what the entire parsha was about this week. The one that we read on Shabbos, mostly about being fair and being honest and being responsible and taking responsibility for our actions and and for other people's goods and products, and it's very much connected to what we were talking about, what we read about on Shabbos.
Rabbi, as a current example, Denise has found that the mashgichim at Jewel and Mariano's always tear the weight of the container before they ring up the ticket, for what's being purchased. In other words, they net out the weight of the container. The other people at the counter don't always do it, but the mashgichim sometimes, advise them to do it.
Nice. That's a great example. I shouldn't be paying, even if it's a few cents or whatever. I shouldn't be paying, especially with the way meat costs these days. I don't want to pay for the package. That's not it's not what I'm buying.
David,
It's a very good example. Yeah.
this is an important enough subject that from what I've learned, it's the first question that you're asked in Olam Haba. Were you honest in your?
Yeah, that's an excellent point, right? The 6 questions that we get when we get asked when we get up to the next world. The first one is Nasasa v'nasata be'amuna. Were you honest in your business dealings? Right. So clearly, this is sort of a defining feature of what it means to be a Jew and to be a holy Jew, is to be very, very scrupulous and honest in your business transactions.
I think
Yeah.
I don't think it's surprising that Hashem calls falsifying weights and measures an abomination, because it refers to one of the 10 commandments about stealing. I mean, it's one of the top 10.
Okay, that's actually a little bit of a debated topic, believe it or not. According to most of the commentaries, the prohibition of lo tignovu, do not steal, is actually referring to stealing human beings, gonei nefashos, kidnapping. Only a few of the commentaries say that is the prohibition against stealing. There is a prohibition against stealing, but either way, okay, yes, but if that's the case, why does the word abomination not get attached to coveting or to murder or to violating the Shabbos or to not honoring your parents? So you're right, it is a big deal over here, but abomination is something it'd be interesting to do a thesis, a study on how many times the word abomination is used in the Torah and exactly when the Torah refers to which sins is an abomination and which ones are just called prohibitions. But this one is clearly in the abomination category. Okay, the sages of blessed memory stated, and this is in Tractate Baba Basra, the punishment for false measures is more severe than the punishment for illicit relations. Okay, the sages, meaning we all know, this is hard to understand, by the way, because illicit relations is one of the 3 prohibitions in the Torah that you have to be willing to give up your life for. And as bad as stealing is and dishonesty is, it's not something I have to give up my life for. If someone puts a gun to your head and says, go break into that person's house and steal his wallet, or go into their office and, to their place of work and steal some of their products, go shoplift, or I'm going to kill you, I don't have to give up my life for that. I have to give up my life for illicit relations. So I don't know exactly how the Talmud in Baba Basra says that the punishment is more severe for stealing than it is for illicit relations, but okay, it's interesting. The sages also stated that a wholesaler must wipe his measures clean once in 30 days and a householder once in 12 months, because a householder is not really using it that often. He's not engaged in constant use of his measuring stones, but a wholesaler is. So therefore he's got to clean it regularly. Okay. And why must the merchant devote so much care to ensure that the measures are clean, so that they should not become diminished unwittingly, and thus by keeping them clean, he will avoid divine punishment he would incur if he would unwittingly cheat his customers. We're not even talking over here about intentionally cheating his customers. We're talking about doing so unwittingly, but just because of a lack of care or lack of attention. Okay, it's very intense, this whole thing. All the more so must one avoid the sin of lending on interest, which is as severe as denying the authority of the God of Israel, heaven forbid. Moreover, the sages of blessed memory said regarding the verse, he gives loans with usury and takes interest, shall he live, he shall not live. That's a verse in Yechezkel, that the verse means that he shall not be resurrected to live at the time of the resurrection of the dead, because interest, as well as its dust, I'll tell you what that means in a minute, is disgusting and abominable in the eyes of Hashem. I do not see any need to explain on the evils of this sin, because its fear is already cast over every Jewish person. Okay, this is something that I'm not sure if people are always that careful with or fully aware of, but lending money with interest from one Jew to another Jew is seriously prohibited, right? A lot of times I hear, family members lending money to family members and charging interest. The Torah does not allow that, and it's considered to be a very, very, very severe prohibition. When Jews lend money to other Jews, we do that without interest. We do it because we view each other as, we care about each other, and we want to see each other be successful, and we are trying to help each other, and it's not an opportunity for me to make money. And what happens here, like I took out a mortgage for my house, and I borrowed the money from Bank Mizrahi, Jewish bank. So when I went to do the mortgage, I said to them, what's the interest rate? They said it's whatever, 35% or whatever it is. And now I have no idea. And I said, well, sorry, but I'm not going to pay any interest. I'm just going to, pay back the principal. I'm not going to pay you any interest because it's forbidden to lend, for one Jew to lend to another Jew on interest, with interest. And they said, okay, no problem. That's fine. We understand. You're a rabbi. That conversation obviously never happened. When you borrow money from a bank in Israel, you pay interest just like you would if you borrow money from a bank anywhere else. So how does that work? How does that work? How do religious people work in the banks? How do religious people borrow money from the banks? And the answer is that there's something, there is a way of setting it up where it's not considered a loan, but it's considered a business venture or a business investment. And in such a way, I'm not paying interest. It's complicated. It's called the heter iska, without going into the details. But the bottom line is you need to be aware of this, and you need to arrange your loan in such a way where, according to Jewish law, you're not paying interest. And if you are, you're violating a big prohibition in the Torah. So if you know, this goes even to the point where, like, let's say, you know, you the other day it was Saturday night, it was after Shabbos, and we wanted to watch a movie, and you can't watch a movie without popcorn, right? So I went into my cabinet in the kitchen, and there was no popcorn in there. So I sent the message to my next door neighbor, Benny. Hey, Benny, do you have any popcorn? And he said, sure, no problem. And he brought over like a half a bag of popcorn, you know. So he gave it to me, and I used it. And I wanted to pay him back. I didn't want to just assume that it was a gift. So next time I was in the store, I got some popcorn, and you know, I was going to give him the bag, but it was a full bag. So it's the question: can you do that? I borrowed a half a bag. If I give him back a full bag, maybe that's borrowing with interest. I mean, I know it sounds silly, right? And
It does sound silly.
but it's a question. It's a question because I borrowed that from him, and I'm paying him back more than I borrowed. So is that interest? And there's, believe it or not, that's a halachic question. The Gemara talks about it, and you know, these are the things that we have to think about when we're interacting with other people in the realm of business and commerce. Okay.
So what if when he didn't ask for more popcorn, you just gave it back as a token of appreciation? That's not necessarily interest.
Right. And also it wasn't a loan.
Right. He didn't
Right.
expect you to like reproduce that popcorn.
Right.
Exact
Right.
popcorn, right?
Right. So it was a gift. And therefore it was a gift. And then and I gave him back a gift. And that's why it was fine. But you know, but you have to stop and think about it. Is that okay? Is that not okay? You know, and it is,
Right.
but why? You know, there's an interesting question that comes up when let's say you send your kids to camp. Whatever, it's complicated. It's a complicated section of Jewish law. Let's put it like that. But you know, if you get an early bird special for paying everything up front before the date of the due date of the money, you know, and you don't have to pay everything up front, but if you pay everything up front before this date, then we'll give you a discount. Well, what does it mean that I'm paying everything up front? I'm lending them money in a sense. So is the discount that they're giving me considered interest on the money that I'm putting down for them? So there are a lot of different versions of the question that come up, but you have to think about it. You can't just say, yeah, it's silly. It's nonsense. It's potentially a very severe prohibition in the Torah. And when we
David,
lend money to our relatives, even if we don't like them that much, we're expected to do it without interest. And you know, and if you're not prepared to lend money to your relatives without interest, then don't lend them money. But to lend money to another Jew with interest is a serious issue in the Torah. Yeah.
Rabbi, just maybe a public service announcement. The IRS does not agree with that statement.
With what? With what part?
Loans between family members require, and I'm not an accountant, but loans between family members require a minimum interest.
imputed.
Really?
Well, they publish every month the minimum interest
Why
for
is that?
this family loans. I think it's related to
The gift
trying
tax,
to
maybe?
prevent intergenerational wealth transfer.
Uh-huh.
Because
Okay.
there's a minimum gift over that, you know, if you
Right.
give somebody money and not paying interest, then it looks like a gift to the IRS. And there's
Right.
a maximum gift you could do, like 16,000 per person or something like that.
Yeah.
Right.
After that,
Right.
it's not, you can't just call it a gift because then there's no tax implications.
So if you just call it a loan
I
to
guess
get out of the gift tax,
you
but
said you
there's
have
no
this-
intention,
but then
there's no intention there's
if
ever
there-
going to pay you back.
and there's
it's not
no
a-
interest,
It's a gift.
and there's no interest attached to it. It doesn't look like a loan.
Got it. Okay, look, hey man, I'm not telling you to, you know, break any laws over here. And if you do, don't quote me on it. Okay. But okay, good to know. Okay, the Ramchal concludes his discussion of Nikias in monetary matters, because now after this, he's going to go on to a new section of Nikias, which is Nikias in forbidden relations, which is a very juicy and exciting part of the book. But hold on, we'll get there. But before he does so, he concludes his discussion on Nikios as it applies to monetary matters. And he says, in any event, the sum of the matter is that just as the desire for money is great, so are its potential pitfalls. So are its potential pitfalls numerous. And in order for a person to be truly naki means clean, cleansed, squeaky clean of these prohibitions, great contemplation and considerable care is required of him. He's making a very important point over here, which is that when it comes to money, we all love money, right? And people get in a lot of trouble for saying this, but and I'm not even going to say it, but people like Joe Rogan, make comments about people, certain groups of people who like money more than other groups of people, and of course he gets accused of being anti-Semitic, whatever. But we do love money, and Jews are. Let's just say like this: Jews don't love money any less than anybody else. Maybe even a little bit more, but I didn't say that.
I don't know about a little bit more.
Okay, but not less, not less.
Not less, but there's plenty of Gentiles that
Who also love money.
and
Fair
cheap as you can possibly be.
Yes. Okay, fair enough. But let's just say we don't love money any less than anybody else.
Right.
So all human beings, and we can discuss the psychology of why that is, but because we have that pull towards money, we have that drive towards money. It's actually interesting, just a sidebar. We talk about the fact that there was once a Yetzer Hara, a big negative drive, inclination towards avodah zarah, towards idolatry. And then we know the famous story that the Sanhedrin came along and they davened to Hashem to remove our desire for idolatry, and Hashem removed that desire because it was gonna be the ruin of the destruction of the world. So now we can't even relate to idolatry. When you read the books of Tanakh, when you read the books of the Samuel or the Kings or the whatever, and you read about all these Jews that were doing avodah zarah, you're like, what? How primitive? How ridiculous? What kind of pleasure could they have gotten out of serving statues or bowing down to idols? It's ridiculous. We can't relate to it. So the one of the great Hasidic commentaries said that that if you want to try to understand what the human desire for idol worship was like before it was removed, think about what the human desire for acquisition or accumulation of money is like today. That's the equivalent drive that existed in human beings for idolatry. So it was as real, idolatry and the drive for idolatry was as real to them as our drive is for acquisition and accumulation of wealth and items, desire, our desire for material items and money. So we have this. And because we have that, even if we think we're being honest, we have to take a double look. We have to take a second look, because we have to know that there's a deep part of us that is always going to try to do things in the way that is going to bring about more money, more revenue, more profit for ourselves. And because we're built that way and we're driven that way, we have to be extra cautious. We have to be, overly scrupulous and on our toes, let's say, on guard for the possibility that we're not being perfectly honest in what we're doing. And therefore we need to look and carefully analyze and ask ourselves, all these things, they're very, it's not simple. Okay. That's why it says great contemplation and considerable care is required in this case. But if he succeeds and becomes completely naki of any impropriety in this matter, he should know that he has indeed reached a lofty level, right? That is considered in Judaism to be a real achievement, an accomplishment, spiritual greatness. Somebody who can honestly say that he is naki, he is clean as a whistle when it comes to all these issues of money matters. For many people behave piously in numerous branches of piety, right? They're very careful with what they eat. They're very careful with their Shabbos observance. They're very careful with their kosher, with everything, with their blessings. But yet in the matters of despising ill-gotten gain, they have been unable to reach the goal of perfection. Although they excel in many areas of religious observance, their desire for money is too formidable a foe. It's amazing. It's amazing. And that explains so much. That explains how you can have what would otherwise be considered very pious people. People that are very religious. They dress religiously, they identify religiously, they act religiously. You would never catch them doing even the most minute violation of a Shabbos prohibition. You would never catch them compromising in any way on their kashrut. And yet somehow they get wrapped up in different types of frauds and scams and things that land them in jail and on the front page of the New York Times. And why is that? Because this drive is a really super, super powerful drive. And if we're not on top of it and we're not being honest with ourselves and we're not checking in with ourselves on a regular basis, we can make mistakes in this area. And they can be minor mistakes or they could be big mistakes. This rare, yeah.
I was reading something in Chabad.org about what idolatry is. It's got nothing to do with the idol itself. It's putting something between you and Hashem. So anything that goes between you and Hashem that supersedes the primary relationship becomes idolatrous. So if money's getting in between you and Hashem, so it's idolatry for a money. And it's also related to a coveting. If people did not covet, maybe they would not have the great desire for money to keep up with somebody else or outdo them or overtake them in business or in yichus or stature.
Absolutely. Yep, that's a very good point. Okay, let's finish this section. This rare attainment of Nikias and monetary affairs is what Zophar the Namasite, Zophar HaNaamasi, meant when he said to Eov, this is one of Job's friends in the book of Job. He had these group of friends that were consulting and his consultants and his confidants. He says, if there is iniquity in your hand, put it far away, and let not perversion dwell in your tent, for then you would lift your face without blemish, you would be steadfast and never fear. Okay, so this is saying that if you want to be able to consider yourself to be righteous and without blemish, then you have to make every effort to stay far away from all of these subtle forms of ill-gotten gain. After writing about theft at such length, Ramchal explains why in this chapter he pays so much attention to this and a few other areas of Torah law. He's only focusing on a few things here in Nikias. Why? Until this point, I've spoken about all the details of only one mitzvah of the 613 in the Torah, that of theft. Similar kinds of detailed subcategories can certainly be found in regard to each and every mitzvah. However, I mention here only those prohibitions in which most people routinely stumble. So what he's saying over here is you need to take the principles of Nikias and apply them to all of the mitzvahs in the Torah, not just the ones that I'm mentioning over here. But I can't write an entire book on that, on going through every single mitzvah in the Torah a Nikias perspective. So I've chosen the ones where that are most commonly problematic or challenging for people. But this applies everywhere and across the board. But this one in particular, and the ones that follow, are areas where most people routinely stumble. It's a constant challenge. It's something that doesn't ease up and doesn't go away. And if you're not on your toes, if you're not diligent, if you're not paying attention to these things, then you will not succeed in these areas. Okay, that concludes the section of the Nikios as it relates to monetary matters. Any other thoughts, comments? Does anybody want to share anything, process this at all, or should we move on to the next section?
Hey, Rabbi.
Rabbi, I have something to say.
Sure.
I remember years ago, I had a friend that would go to stores. She was looking for wallpaper, and she would go to a store and really spend time with the salesperson. And then she said, oh my God, now I know what I want. I'm going to order it online. And that really, really bothered me. And to this day, it bothers me. So what do you think I should have done?
What should you have done? Absolutely nothing. But is it wrong what she's doing? Yeah, that's not a good, you can't do that. You're not supposed to do that. I mean, if it's someone that you're very close to who you feel like you could say, hey, I'm not sure if that's the most honest thing in the world. And I feel like maybe you're taking someone's time, precious time, and you have no intention of buying. If you feel like you could say that to her and she would listen and accept it, then yes, you should. But if she's not going to hear it, then there's nothing, I'm a big believer in not rebuking people that are not going to listen. But in terms of the actual situation that you're describing, we should be aware of that. And if you're going to go into that kind of situation, you have to say something up front, like, look, I want to just tell you up front, I'm not planning on buying this here. And, and if you prefer not to, give me your time, that's fine. Some of them might say, no, I want to do it anyway, because you know what, maybe they will buy it. If I show them something they like and I can give them a good price, maybe they will end up buying it. So it's at that point, it's their choice. But if you have no intention of buying it from them, then you should let them know. You should either not do it, or you should let them know.
The other thing that's going on, I think, in America now, which I feel very sad, is, and I'm guilty of that, like people will go to Bed Bath & Beyond or go to Best Buy and really talk to the salespeople, and then they buy on Amazon. And all these stores are going out of business. It's very, very sad. So those are my 2 cents worth.
Yeah, no, that's a very, very good point. And it's something that we should be aware of. We should be careful with. Yeah, Brian, I think you were about to say something over there.
Hi, Rabbi.
Hi.
So could you, the weights and measures is such a big deal. What are some applications of that in business today? Is that a metaphor for looking at the way we do business today? Or is it simply if you're in a business where you're having to do weights and, weigh out things for people, that's the only application?
So both. So that, on the basic level, it's referring to, shopkeepers who sell their goods on a scale, and, you have to calibrate your scales correctly and accurately. But it also has a much broader application, which is, when you're billing your time, you have to bill your time accurately, and you can't inflate the amount of time that you spent on something if you're billing by the hour, or, I'm trying to think of other applications, anywhere where there's room for you to, sort of fudge things a little bit. You have to make sure, that you're not doing that. I'm trying to think what else comes to mind. What are some other areas where you can fudge your numbers a little bit and be by doing so, be stealing from somebody. Time, I think, is
Stealers,
obviously.
Uh,
What is it?
Our
What'd you
car mechanics should give back the parts. The parts are yours. And, you can.
Or that's actually, it's a good people like car mechanics who are, telling you they're using a certain part when, you don't know what part they're putting in there. They might be putting in a aftermarket part or whatever. So you have to repairmen. Yep. That's a good point. Repairmen that they, that they're, if they say that they, they're charging for a certain amount of time, or they're charging for the parts that they're using. Yeah, those are all. Drive. Sorry?
Sorry, I don't know what happened.
Oh,
I wanted to respond to what Hannah said.
yeah.
And I mean, Amazon, they have an amazing business model, and Bed Bath & Beyond and some of the other companies, maybe they just need to change their game a little bit. I mean, yeah, when you wanted to go to those big stores and that was the business model, they were great, but maybe they need to adapt. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to go with the company that has the best business model. If you can get it faster from Amazon, and maybe you saw it at Bed Bath & Beyond, and it's cheaper, then I don't think it's.
I don't think that was, I'm not sure if that's what Hannah's frustration was, as much as it is like going to Bed Bath & Beyond, talking to their salesperson so that you can see the item in person, touch it, feel it, experience it, and then say, thank you very much. And then going and buying it on Amazon. That's where, using Bed Bath & Beyond or Best Buy or whatever as a sort of way to see the product that you're going to buy on Amazon I think is more about what Hannah was talking about. I think that can be problematic unless you tell them, and if you tell them and they decide to give you the time anyway, then that's fine. And they might, if they're smart, they will, because or that's why a lot of companies these days do matching. Best Buy will match a price that you find on Amazon, not any price you find on Amazon, but if Amazon itself is selling that product, Amazon as an Amazon product,
Right.
They'll match the price at Best Buy. So so that's a good thing to keep in mind. Brian, when you asked the question, did you have any other examples in mind about the weights and measures and how that might apply in real?
I was just thinking about it more broadly in terms of, fees charged, it sort of came up, accurate calculation of fees charged.
Yeah.
But
anywhere where your customer doesn't know where he's at your mercy in a sense, because with the weights and measures, you're at the storekeeper's mercy. Whatever his scale says is what's going to be. And if he's inaccurately calibrating his scales or he's tipping the scales in his benefit, you're not going to know. So anywhere where your customer is in the dark and you have the opportunity to embellish or to fudge or to cook the books in some way, that I think is an application of the same idea.
Yeah, agreed. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Now let's dive into another topic over here, which is certainly going to be interesting. And that is the area of forbidden relations. Okay. In the Torah, the word for forbidden relations is arayot or arayos. Arayos are, if you look in really two places, one is in Parshas Kedoshim and one is in Parshas Acharei Mos. They're both in Leviticus. It's where the Torah goes through all the forbidden relationships, sexual relationships that are prohibited in the Torah. Let's see if I can. Do I not have a chumash down here? Okay, whatever. But you basically know what they are. They're incest, having sexual engagement or sexual activity with, certain family members, closer family members. Certainly, obviously, siblings or parents, but also aunts and uncles or cousins are actually, that's not true. Step parents, all of those issues, as well as a married woman, which is, obviously an issue of adultery. And the Torah is specific about sexual behavior being conducted between males and females. There's a lot of different things in the Torah that are considered to be arayos. Violating those are prohibited by the Torah specifically and explicitly. So in page 188, Nikias in forbidden relationships. We will now speak about arayos, illicit relations, as they too are among the sins that are coveted by people as mentioned above, and they are second only to theft in terms of their level of challenge, as indicated by the statement of the sages of blessed memory that I mentioned above, which says most people stumble with regard to theft, and a minority of them with regard to illicit relations. Okay. Okay. So accordingly, if one wishes to be completely cleansed of this sin, he too will need no small amount of effort to succeed. For the prohibition of arayos includes not only the forbidden act itself, but also anything associated with it. Because I was going to say, like, I'm looking at everyone on this call and I can't see everybody because some people have their cameras off, but I don't think that, too many people on this call are, directly involved in these arayos, these forms of illicit relations, adultery and incest and et cetera, et cetera. So what does it mean that so many of us are? What is the Talmud saying when it says that, there's a serious, a large minority of people are involved in illicit relationships? So the answer is illicit relationships does not just have to mean the sexual act itself. It can mean anything associated with it, which is what we'll have to discuss. This expanded definition of arayos is anchored in an explicit verse. The verse in the Torah in Leviticus says, Lo sikravu lagalos erva, which is a very unusual language. A man shall not approach his close relative to uncover erva. Erva is the nakedness. So with all the other mitzvahs in the Torah says, don't eat this, or don't do this, or don't say this. But it doesn't say, Lo sikravu lechol treifa. Don't come close to, don't even approach to eating a dead animal or whatever, any prohibition in the Torah. It just says don't do it, don't do X. It doesn't say don't approach doing X. But when it comes to the prohibition of illicit relations, it says lo sikravu, don't even come close, don't even approach the prohibition of legalos erva, to uncover the nakedness of someone who you're prohibited from being with. Look at number 34 down below. By warning us not to approach a relative to uncover erva, the nakedness, this verse forbids behavior that can result in forbidden intimacy, quite apart from the act itself. Okay, so it's not just the act itself, but it's the things that can get you there, can lead to it, can bring a person there. Thus, the verse should be understood to mean, do not approach them in a manner that can lead to uncovering erva. Okay, so that's the Torah's unique language when it comes to this prohibition.
Rabbi,
David,
does that include not even think about it?
yeah,
Don't apply your mind to it.
So, good question. We'll have to see.
thinking about Jimmy Carter, may he have a easy few days left. He was lusting in his heart,
He was just being honest.
thinking about it.
Okay, so we'll have to see we'll have to keep that in mind. It's a good question, and we'll see if he discusses it as well. But yes, I think that that's a very, very good point, and I'm not sure you're gonna like the answer so much, but we'll hold off until we get there. Okay, Further proof that anything associated with an immoral act is prohibited. On this subject, the sages of the blessed memory recounted the following divine admonition. I'm on page 189 on the top. The Holy One, blessed be he, said to the Jewish people, do not say to yourself, since I am forbidden to have relations with the woman, I will at least hold her and not be guilty of sin. Or I will hug her and not be guilty of sin. Or I will kiss her and not be guilty of sin. In response, the Holy One, blessed be he, said, just as one who vows to be a Nazirite, right, to refrain from drinking wine, and thus not drink wine, is also forbidden to consume fresh grapes and raisins, right? If you decide to be a Nazirite, you can't even eat grapes or raisins because you might come to drink wine. Substances in which grapes have been steeped and any derivative of the grapevine, these are all prohibited for Nazirite. So is regarding a woman who is not your wife, it is forbidden to touch her at all. Okay, which is where we end up with the prohibition, of shaking hands and these types of things. The Midrash concludes, and anyone who touches a woman who is not his wife brings death upon himself, and as it is stated, for she has felled many victims. I don't think that means he's going to drop dead on the spot, but I think it means that it is something that leads to something that leads to life being taken away from you in some way or some form, maybe an olam haba, whatever. But the bottom line over here is that this is a very, very serious prohibition, which is why you have this which somewhat could be somewhat awkward at times, a situation where religiously observant people try, not always succeed, sometimes it's very hard, but try not to even shake hands or hug other people when they're greeting them, and there are tricks to this. That's where the custom of double-fisted drinking comes very, very much it becomes very helpful. If you have a drink in each hand, it's very hard to shake hands with somebody when you meet them. So if you ever notice at L'Chaim Center, if you ever see me with a drink in each hand or holding a baby, that's another good one. If there's a baby, you hold the baby. Whatever you need to do to avoid getting in that awkward situation. There are commentaries and halachic discussion about what to do if somebody extends their hand to you. Some people say it's, in that case, it's okay to shake their hand, because, it's not really an act of shaking hands today is not considered in any way, shape, or form an act of intimacy. It's just a sort of formal greeting, it's like bowing or doing whatever. Also because you're involved, it could potentially involve embarrassing somebody, which is something we always try to avoid doing, whatever. But the bottom line is that if you ever wonder why it is that Orthodox people generally avoid trying to touch people that, not their wives or not their husbands, it's for this reason, because the Torah doesn't only prohibit the sexual act, but it even prohibits the things that could eventually lead to a person having a level of intimacy with somebody that they're not allowed to be intimate with. Yeah. Any questions on that? Let's take it one more step over here and then we'll stop. So the Ramchal. Yep.
I have a quick question for you about this.
Yeah.
So as luck would have it, this last week, Brian and I went to a lecture that was at a conservative shul. And we walked in and the rabbi, we were introduced to the rabbi and he went to shake my hand. And ordinarily
awkward.
Right. I ordinarily I would not do that, but obviously it was a little bit of a loaded circumstance. I not only did not want to make him feel bad, I also felt as though I also didn't want to appear as though I was more
Holier
pious
than thou.
right. And so I just did it, and I kind of paused initially, and I thought, this is kind of a no-win circumstance. So I think I'm just going to shake his hand, and that'll be that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think what you should have done is you should have stopped and said in a very loud voice, "But Rabbi, I thought that we're not allowed to shake hands with somebody of the opposite gender in Judaism."
Right. That's what I was taught anyway.
Yeah.
Rabbi,
No, I mean, you
Rabbi-
get in these wait 1 second, Hannah. You get in these situations where you have no choice, right? So that's obviously one of the situations where it's very, very hard to, to rebuff that gesture in a way that's not going to be really, really, off-putting. So, so you shake hands, but what my rabbi always told me is just like, yeah, you shake hands, dead fish, dead fish.
Give him the dead fish.
Give him the dead fish.
Great.
Yeah, Hannah.
I just wanted to say that at Beit Tfilah, my shul here in Arizona, Rabbi Alush, if a woman tries to shake his hand, he'll shake her hand. His wife will not. She won't have anything to do with another man. But I remember being in shul and one of my friend's mothers died, and Rabbi Alush actually went over to her and he gave her a hug. And I thought that was such a wonderful, wonderful gesture that he did. So, I guess all rabbis have their shtick, but I really, really admired him that he went over to this old lady, well, probably my age, I don't know. But her husband had just died, and he just walked over and he gave her a hug and, talked to her. And I thought that was really an amazing, amazing gesture. By the way, Doris, it was Julie's mother. That's it.
Okay. All right. I think we're going to call it quits here. I got to drive Yosef to baseball, but we'll continue next week on the bottom of 189. And wishing everybody a Shavua Tov. Have a great week. All the best.
David,
Great to see everybody.
Thank
Yes.
you.
I have a plug before everybody.
Okay.
Any man who has an opportunity to come to Shabbos next week to daven, we sure could use you. There's a lot of guys who are going to be gone. So if you ever plan to come for a Shabbos, next week would be a good one. Thank you.
Okay.
Rabbi?
Yeah. Hi, Bonnie. Yeah.
Hi. Going back to the shake hands or not shake hands. Why are some things that we won't do, like we won't go to someone's house and eat pork tenderloin? We will come up with something that says, all my teeth are going to fall out. And so, something like that. You can make light of it. You could say, I'm sorry, I don't eat pork. Or you could just be clear. Why does one, this is a big one. You don't want to touch someone of the opposite gender because you want to say that, it's not proper. So why do we get to fade on that one? Because we haven't come up with either a witty response or just a simple response. We're not going to embarrass them. You
Right,
just like,
right.
sorry, I can't.
Right. So I think it's a great question. And I think that if you have a way of saying it in a nice way where it's not going to embarrass them, that's certainly preferable. Like Lee's situation that she mentioned, obviously was a tougher one. But if it's just a normal situation, there are a lot of people that just say, you know what, you don't have to say anything. Just do something like that, and they'll get the message, or they won't.
And all the more
The only
so.
reason why there's a little bit of room to be lenient, there's two reasons why there's a little bit of room to be lenient, as opposed to the pork tenderloin example, and that is that really one difference, which is that there are people that say that shaking hands is not, because it's just a sort of formality that people do to greet one another. It has nothing to do with the prohibition of inappropriate touch. So there are people that say that it's not even, it's different than hugging or kissing or whatever. It's shaking hands. But most people don't agree with that, and most people rule that it's certainly better to avoid it if possible. So
There are some people's handshakes that don't meet that lenient criteria.
that's true. That's true.
And you
that's
won't
why-
know till you're in the middle of it.
That's why you give them the dead fish. Give them the dead fish. Okay, I got to run, everybody. Yosef's going to kill me if he's late for baseball. Have a great week. Shavua Tov.
Oh,
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you.